and then we can kind of talk about it together. All right, looks like we are live on YouTube. Yay. Love when technology works, because we know it doesn't always do that. Don't have my glasses on, so the screen is a little perfect. All right. Now, go back to my, there we go, Zoom. Hello, hello. Okay, welcome. My name is Stacy Harder, and tonight I am reading from my mom's very first book, Many Were Called, Few Were Chosen, the story of Mother Earth and her Earth-based volunteers. And she wrote this over 30 years ago, and to me, it's like her first really big dive into the world we know today. And this was actually given to her. She kind of just got all this information, all this remembrance. And so she wrote this book in 8 days. It was her very first book. And to me, it's exactly what we're going through right now on this earth. And hello, hello. So this is just, I reread a chapter on the phone the other night with a friend, and I was like, I need to record this. So that's what I'm doing. We're putting this out there. Hopefully, if you're watching on YouTube, it will be chapter by chapter. And then if you're watching on Instagram, we'll see how parts and how much we get on it. But we're going to definitely at least read one chapter tonight. We'll see how far it goes. So many were called, few were chosen. If you don't know my mom, she is amazing. Entrepreneur, author, writer, spiritual communicator. She's the first person I learned how to channel with or from. And I was 12, I think, when I learned that. So a long time ago. And she's been my greatest teacher. We do free cosmic conversations on Thursdays. You're welcome to join us live. Depending on technology, it can be on YouTube. We're definitely always on Zoom, so you can 100% go to Zoom. You can always meet us sometimes here on Facebook and sometimes on Instagram. Again, it's a technology thing, but hopefully YouTube will also have all my stuff. So we're gonna begin. And this is, again, her remembrance of our story on Earth and why we're here, why we're in human form, what are we doing, what is our mission? And most of us have that feeling inside, kind of like, I know I'm here for more than this. So this is our story. And if you don't know if you're a light worker or a way shower or a starseed or whatever those terms you want to use, then more than likely, since you're asking that question and because you're watching this video, you are meant to be this. You're meant for this message. HeatherHarder.com is her website, and you can order all of her books there. And she's got a lot. So I'm going to begin. Many were called, few were chosen. By The Story of Mother Earth and Earth-Based Volunteers by Dr. Heather Ann Harder. By the way, I used to be really nervous to read. I've had a vision thing where I had to really work on my eyes adjustment. So reading out loud for me has always made me nervous, which is also another reason why I'm doing it, because I'm stretching my boundaries. All right, it starts with acknowledgements. My sincere, oh, by the way, she wrote this in 1994. Acknowledgements. My sincere appreciation to my dear friends and family who have assisted with the preparation of this manuscript. Their kindness and support helped me make the hours pass more quickly. Their willingness to edit it and review and material helped to provide insight and clarification to the big picture. There are many who assisted, and all are loved. A special thanks to Charles David Henke, Deborah McGrew, Brian Goose, and Doris for their technical skills and intellectual inspirations, to Diane Carnahan for her artistic insights, and to Willie Culberton for his faith and willingness to serve Mother Earth. My thanks also to Bob, Carrie, and Stacy, that's me, her daughter, my dear family who have ever been a mirror for my many lessons, and finally to my father and deceased mother who have taught me to stand tall in the face of adversity and to respect the truths of others, even when they are not my truths. To these and the many more unnamed friends in all dimensions of experience, I offer my gratitude. Table of contents, we're going to include chapter 1 is in the beginning, there was a choice. In the beginning, there was a choice. In the beginning, God created the heavens. And wait, let me pause and just say, anything you hear in this book, I always recommend, this is Mom's first thing, is always, before you listen to any book or any speaker or anything, always ask for protection, guidance, and to know truth. Protection and guidance and know truth, you will be taken care of. It is free will, which this book will actually get into a lot of that. But if this doesn't resonate with you, that's fine. Take it some, if it does, then that's great too. So I just want to preface with that. Okay. And if you get chills and tears, a lot of times those are remembrances. Chills are, for me, my body's way of saying pay attention, or this is truth, or this is important, or like, yes, like it's an affirmation, kind of like, yes, yes, yes. Okay, now I'll begin. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, and they were good. God called for earth Terra, T-E-R-R-A, and it was to be unique in all the universe. Terra would allow free will to reign. Free will was in itself a unique challenge. When planets had been formed in the past, and there's a number 1, which we'll get to after, they had always been diagnosed to test or develop 1 or 2 aspects of being. Planets which allowed for the exploration and growth in the areas of emotions, fluidity, flexibility, or perhaps perception were relatively easy to accomplish, but giving total free will was truly unique. Unlimited choices also meant that there had to be a way of allowing those unlimited choices and of allowing beings to live with the unlimited consequences of those unlimited choices. This was a logistical nightmare, even for the divine God source. Terra was to be a place where each being's experiences and life would be a unique expression of the individuality of the person. The life experience would be the result of the individual choices made, and this was an enormous endeavor. The God essence gave free will to earth, and it was truly a wondrous gift. Free will was to be the divine plan for earth. This plan provided for even the smallest detail, and this was good, as the divine plan always is. Free will did not come easily. Free will meant that humanity had to choose a variety of alternatives. Choice had to be extended into every domain imaginable, both physical and non-physical. Therefore, alternatives had to be created in every arena. Unlike all other planetary existence, Terra had to provide unlimited choice in every domain. There had to be an infinite variety in such things as food choice, plant life, weather conditions, living arrangements, skin colors, hair textures, from the smallest detail, blades of grass or snowflakes, to the largest creations, the beasts that roamed the earth. There is a boundless variety. This would give those of earth the opportunity to truly choose. Thus, in the beginning, God provided for all choice. To ensure that free will would be the law of the land, Earthians were allowed to maintain the ability to co-create with God essence. The ability to co-create is always possible outside the laws of physical, but to maintain this ability while in physical was somewhat new. Yet the ability to co-create allowed those of Earth the ability to give birth to an even more unique world, and provided an even greater ability to choose and then live with those choices. All right, so when I do the little sidekicks, I'll do this on the side, and if I do, then I'll come back and read that box. And this one is, new worlds must be constantly evolved to ensure classroom space for those that need it. New worlds replace the old ones that no longer serve their intended purpose, and those that provided lessons which are no longer needed. Just as new schools are built to replace old ones on Earth, each new planet is different. It can never be just the same as the old one or serve the same function. Therefore, unlike the tearing down of the old schools, old planets are never discarded. Instead, more choices are provided and new opportunities for growth are ensured. Humanity was given the ability to co-create with God because humanity can never create in the absence of God. This God/creator gave power to humanity, the ability to be the creator of an ever new and ever changing world of their own design. I actually read that wrong. I switched the words around. So the God/creator power gave humanity the ability to be the creator of an ever new and changing world for their own design. God's plan for Earth was free will. The divine plan allowed each human the right and the responsibility to create their destiny. If it was created in harmony with God, then all was created from love. If not, then humanity had the opportunity to experience that and then choose again. This was the divine plan for Earth, and this was good, as the divine plan always is. Divine plan gave Terra the uniqueness of being a dynamic, ever-changing world, a world in which those in residence would determine its path. Each individual was given the ability to contemplate his or own reality. In this ability to contemplate was seated the Creator's ability to create. The divine plan allowed for each person to both perceive and create with mere thought. This was the only way to allow for the diversity of choice needed on the planet. And this was good, as the divine plan always is. Choice mandated that alternatives had to be present. As beauty and light were present, so too were the various shades of darkness. Thus, darkness too was part of the divine plan. For if people did not experience darkness, then how could they truly know the light with full awareness? Darkness was never meant to be judged, only experienced. The forces of light and the forces of darkness were always kept in balance so that free will could prevail. In the beginning, balance was important, just as it is now. It is through balance that humanity is able to freely choose without outside pressure and influence. And this was good, as the divine plan always is. Terra, hello. Terra was given specific cycles to ensure that new experiences or choices would always be present on Earth. Cycles were put into that place that allowed for all things, including growth and weather patterns, as well as planetary influence. These cycles were determined by the Creator in the beginning. Thus, these cycles could not, would not, and will not be changed except by divine intervention. The divine plan had proven to be perfect, and this was good, as the divine plan always is. The first Earth inhabitants in human form were much different than we know today. We would probably label them more as spirits, as they possess only a light body, and were not physically limited nor bound by a permanent physical body. They have the ability to move in or out of physicality and assume any form. They could easily choose to be in a physical embodiment as we know it, or they could choose total freedom from it. Moving in or out of any physical form desired allowed them to experience the state of consciousness of that form for as long as a short time as they wished. They could experience a tiger stalking its prey and instantly experience being the prey. They could experience the solidity of a rock and the nobility of a tree with the flicker of a thought. This gave them compassion and a deeper understanding for what existence was like for all life forms on Earth. Best of all, those early inhabitants were always very connected to the divine consciousness. They were never separated from the God force that created them. Their vibrational life force was in perfect harmony with the vibrational life force of the God source. This connection was the reason they could instantly manifest into any and all physical forms. They shared the creative nature with God. God is both the creation and creator. Therefore, humanity shared the ability to be both the creation and the creator. Earthians recognized that they could experience physical life from many perspectives and learn from each, but they never confused themselves, their divine essence, with their physical form, creation. So they're very different things. So there's a picture, and that's Diane Carnahan's work. So words marked by this symbol are often used elsewhere as judgmental terms and perhaps may even carry a negative meaning. This is not meant here for all things but our experiences. Thus, these words, as used here, denote no greater or lesser value or goodness. Unfortunately, there are no judgment-free words available that express that desired meaning, so therefore these words will have to do. So know that from those like good, bad, those kind of experiences, that she's not meaning them to be judgmental. It's just kind of the only words that we really have in our vocabulary. Life was abundantly filled with unconditional love. So whatever choice was made, even darkness, for that too was a choice. Life was always filled with joy, peace, and harmony with the Creator and all creation. Earth existence was a playground of experiences, a virtual Disneyland of delight. The divine intelligence had provided all that was needed for a life of abundance. The divine intelligence had provided all that was needed for a life filled with unlimited joy and love. All Earthians had to do was choose it. Hello, hello. I get excited to say hello to people. So life was abundantly filled with unconditional love, so whatever choice was made, even darkness, for that too was a choice. Life was always filled with joy, peace, and harmony with the Creator and all the creation. Earth, I'm rereading this because this is what I said earlier when I get nervous. I'm rereading it on accident because I lost my place. So Earth's existence was a playground of experiences, a virtual Disneyland of delight. The divine intelligence had provided all that was needed for a life of abundance. The divine intelligence had provided all that was needed for a life filled with unlimited joy and love. All Earthians had to do was choose it, and this was good, as the divine plan always is. Earthians could move into other dimensions and worlds with ease, as it was their own desire, held in thought, which moved them. The consequences of their thoughts were immediately realized, and the process was fully understood. Those of Earth realized the wisdom of the divine plan. They maximized their use of power that was given to them. There was great happiness, the magnitude unlike anything that could be imagined today. If a choice was made that brought an unpleasant consequence, then they merely altered the choice. There was no guilt or self-recrimination, where they realized that they and only they had the ability to alter or control their own destiny. No reactions such as blame, guilt, anger, or aggression were needed or felt. I'll repeat that. There was no guilt or self-recrimination, where they realized that they and only they had the ability to alter the control of their own destiny. No reactions such as blame or guilt or anger or aggression were needed or felt. They would just merely correct their path, right the air, and move on. Secure is the knowledge of their relationship with the God force and the wisdom of the divine plan. The love and joy experienced during this time knew no bounds. Free will provided the opportunity to explore and to grow through the process of exploration and experience. These physical form experiences provided unique opportunities for awareness and growth. Earthians knew it and appreciated the great gift of physicality, and this was good, as the divine plan always is. Life in the fashion went on for eons of time, as the cycle of life, death, and rebirth had not been created, for it was not yet needed. Humanity, in its role of co-creator with the God force, had played, explored, and created many exotic forms. The animal kingdom offered many opportunities. Some Earthians had assembled the head of one beast and the tail of another, and the skin of another. Much as children today play, what if a giraffe had wings, and so forth. But when the earlier Earth inhabitants played this game, these strange creatures were brought into existence. The Earthians did not always see the need to reinstate the original form. After all, God had given them dominion over the beast. Those playing this game often liked the many few forms created, even though they were not always the most pleasant, or comfortable, or convenient for the beast. This was the beginning of the first problem that humanity created for itself. Earthians had begun to become more concerned with self's desires than with the welfare of the beasts or others in their care. This caused a vibrational change. I'll define vibrational in the next box. For the first time, Earthians have lowered their divine vibration, causing them not to resonate in divine harmony with the God force. It had been their choice. They were fully aware of that, but because of their own choice, for the first time, Earthians were not fully connected to the universal consciousness. They were no longer an equal part of the God force, and this non-connection caused them great despair. Earthians were still potentially and theoretically equal as they are now. They were a spark of the pure God divine source. Their essence was the essence of God. They knew it, and yet had made choices that had altered their divinity. And then as now, they were fully creating what they experienced and fully experienced what they had created. They had chosen, at least temporarily, a path of pain and separation from the God force. They knew it and assumed full responsibility for it. The process is much like listening to a radio station while traveling in a car. As you travel farther from the radio station, the static increases and it is harder to understand. If you adjust your dial, you can often get the station more clearly. After each mile you travel, because the reception of fade, or each mile you travel causes the reception to fade. At some point, you must decide whether the trip or the radio transmission is more important. If the trip is of greater value, you proceed and find another station to turn off the radio. If the transmission is more important, you must turn around and head back the way you came. When Earthians resonated to the same frequency as the God force, the reception was clear. God's thoughts were the thoughts of humanity. But as the Earthians began to lower their frequency, the connection between God and them became less clear. When in harmony with God's vibrational frequency, all of humanity resonated with unconditional love and light. But as the connection faded, so did this state of bliss. Earthians had to choose to travel back to the frequency of the divine connection or travel on without it. Okay, going back to the box. Every creation has a molecular movement of atomic structure. This is an energy movement, and it is known as the vibrational frequency. Humanity had resonated with the divine frequency, therefore it was at one mint, atonement, right? At one mint with the Creator. With this connection, humanity had access to all knowledge and truth. As humanity made choices that caused the lowering or slowing of this vibrational frequency, some people call it the denser density, to the slowing of this vibrational frequency, it lost the ability to be at one with God. This came to be known as the descent of humanity. Currently, Earthians are reawakening to that process needed to raise their vibrational frequency so they can once again experience the unconditional love and joy that is always present in the divine frequency. This can happen easiest when they realize that love is the answer. More on this later. As this process occurred in the Earthian experience, many chose to reconnect with the God source. and others chose to continue the trip in a state of separation. Thus, humanity continued on their physical journey. The decision was and is an individual one and can be made at any time, for each must decide which is worth more: the connection to the God essence or the life of illusion and separation. The second major problem developed when others who had remained in harmony with or had chosen to reconnect with the divine force began to help. Those who did not maintain that harmony, in some instances, they insisted that their way be followed because, after all, they knew what was best. This was the problem: judgment. First, Earth was and is a free will planet. Divine plan mandated that each be allowed to follow his or own choices with no exceptions. It was imperative that each follow his or her. There was no gender orientation at that time, our own guidance and free will. One was never to infringe on the free will of another. Yet, here were well-meaning humans trying to influence and even mandate the behavior of another because they had first judged the other's choice to be inferior or wrong. Even though the gesture was well meant, the judgments and the resulting interference caused major alterations in the vibrational nature of humanity, and they continue to do so on this planet. Had humanity honored and respected each individual's right to free will, Earth and humanity would be in a very different place today then as now. Humanity forgot there are no right or wrong choices, only alternatives which bring about different consequences. For always, humanity is responsible for their choices. Judgments of others cause major alterations in the divine frequency. The more humanity judged one another, the more they fell from the grace of the Creator Source. The more humanity judged one another, the more they taught judgments to each other. Judgments begot more judgments. They could have shared their insights with each other with unconditional love and unconditional respect for the choices of others, but they did not. They judged. And that was the second major frequency disturbance on beloved planet Earth. Humanity was free to choose, and they chose to judge. As a consequence of those judgments, humanity tried to control and manipulate the behavior of their fellow humans. If only those well-meaning ancestors had simply shared the array of choices rather than trying to dictate the right behavior, life would be very different today. But they didn't. Instead, they held on to the outcome. They tried to force their choice on others. They were thus in violation of divine law, and they greatly disturbed the divine frequency. As a result, a new cycle was put into place on Mother Earth. That of judgment, manipulation, and control. It was and is one of the single most destructive choices that humanity has created, for it violates the heart of the divine plan. It goes against the will of God. God allowed for all choices and had created a process for one to experience the consequences of those choices, but humanity had defied it. Thus, this was the knife that created a total separation from God. Humanity had willingly cut themselves off from the oneness of all creation. Yet this too was allowed under the laws of divine plan, and this was good, as the divine plan always is. As Earthians took their eyes off their own path in order to examine the paths of others, they began to lose sight of the game which they were playing. They began to take the whole process seriously and forget to enjoy it. This lack of joy and the introduction of judgments greatly reduced the Earthians' vibrational frequency. With the introduction of judgments, Some Earthians began to feel superior or inferior to others, depending on the outcome of their judgments. They forgot that all are equal and that all choices bring lessons and growth, and that none are better or worse than others. Diversity of choice was planned for and allowed in the divine law. These feelings of inferiority or superiority were also in disharmony with the God force vibration. Earthians were now on a sled, moving at first imperceptibility, imperceptibly, moving at first imperceptibly down a great vibrational hill. This was their choice. The God force allowed it to be. They still had knowledge of the divine plan and maintained a full awareness that they had to do was create a new experience. Yet their choices only served to continually lower their God force vibration. Thus, again, was choice and was allowed according to the divine plan. The vibrational shift occurred slowly at first. As eons of time elapsed, the vibrations were considerably lowered. The vibrational center of humanity is in the heart era. Therefore, these changes have often been referred to as changes in the hearts of Earthians. These changes resulted in an even greater awareness of separation from the God force and the universal consciousness. This caused an even greater despair in humanity, which in turn brought about an even greater lowering of the vibration. Free will was still in operation. Earthians knew of love and joy that awaited them in the realms of higher vibrations. They knew their choices were causing pain instead of pleasure. They knew these were consequences of Earthian free will. They knew of the wisdom of the divine plan. This was good, as the divine plan always is. Suffering had been introduced to Earth. It had been created by those in residence. It had been created because of the fall or lowering of the God force vibration of humanity. It had caused humanity to turn to self-concern rather than to the knowledge that each individual was truly one with the universe. They had forgotten that life was meant to be a game played for sheer joy of experience. Instead, certain choices had been made by those in residence, and they now had to live with the painful consequences of those choices. Humanity could have made choices that resulted in raising its vibrations. It did not. This too was their choice. Slowly at first, but more rapidly, for time did not yet exist, Earthians lost many of their wondrous abilities due to the lowering of the vibrational frequency, which was synonymous with the separation from the God essence. Earthians ceased to be able to easily move in and out of physical form. As their individual vibrations lowered, their ability to instantly manifest was also lessened. The creations took longer to become apparent. They began to doubt their own abilities to co-create with God, and thus their doubts became their reality. They could no longer travel just by willing it. Some Earthians got stuck in their unusual created forms. Others had simply hardened into one form or another. Much of the unbridled pleasure once known to them had been lost. Their choices had greatly limited their subsequent choices, though they still had the right to choose and to change their choice. They still had the right to expand or diminish their choices, and they knew it. Yet change they did not. Earthians continued to behave in a way that served to further lessen their choices. God had given them the choice, the ability, and the right to choose. For indeed, this was the law of free will, And this was good, as the divine plan always is. The Creator planned for all eventualities through a safety factor built into the divine plan. The more tuned one is to the universal God essence, the more ability one has to co-create. The further one is from the vibrational frequency of the God force, the slower the creative process. This gives humanity an opportunity to change its creations before the consequences are felt. And had an earthling enjoyed playing in the waters of earth, he might have manifested fins and scales. Someone who enjoyed the freedom of the air might have created wings and feathers, much as people today put on scuba gear or use equipment for hang gliding. No big deal. One just had to envision or hold the thought of what was wanted. Unfortunately, as the frequency was lowered, right, the earthians often became more entrapped, lacking the patience to undo what they had done. If your mother ever warned you against making faces, or your face might freeze like that, then this may be a buried cellular memory of this long time ago. That's chapter 1. I'm going to stop now, and I'm going to do each chapter as a separate thing, but I just want to say that she wrote this again in 1994. Or no, it was before that. This one, she published this. She published it through different people before that. Anyways, it's about 30 years ago that she wrote this book. I remember, I don't know what you remember. So another beautiful thing is, because it's free will and choice, you can choose to remember, and you can ask your team or guides to help you remember. And so one thing within the last few years, the more intentions I've been putting out there to ask to remember, the more I am remembering. And so when she talks about that in the beginning of humanity, I remember being that energy light form. And I remember knowing that lower vibrational people came around, I had to put this suit on, which was a human body, and it was a form. And I remember this beautiful blue light. And even though we were light, like we were energy forms, some had dimensions, some had, just, it's so unique that we don't even have creatures or anything like it. But imagine like a snail meets a seahorse kind of thing. Like, you can see that in different people's energy, I guess is what it would be. But anyways, that was chapter 1. Next chapter is more changes. So I'm going to keep going on IG. Hello, Esme. I'm also live on YouTube, and I'm doing recordings of Mom's book. And by the way, if you want to order her book, you can go to heatherharder.com. These are some of her books. The next one I'm going to be reading is The Dimensions and Awakening of the Divine Consciousness, Understanding the Earth's Journey from Third to Fifth Dimension. And yeah, so thank you. Love and light. And we're going to start chapter 2 next.